Welcome to Crossroad Connection. We're speaking out for those left unheard. My name is David SCHURINGA. I'm the president of Crossroad Bible Institute and the host of your program. And in the studio today with me, I have a special guest. His name is Robert Natras, who is the area director for Healing Communities in Western Michigan. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you.
It's good to have you with us here today. We're interested in hearing your story. Healing Communities is a large network of organizations started by Harold Trulier to help returning citizens. Am I correct?
Correct. It's basically mobilizing churches and organizations in cities to fully embody the whole process of incarceration, from the arrest all the way to release, whether it's the families or the individuals that are left behind in that process.
And you are, your office is housed by New Community Church. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's where a good friend of ours is the pastor, Mark Vandermeer. He's been on the program. And you have been ordained as the pastor of People in Recovery at that church earlier this year, correct?
Correct. March 17th was the ordination.
Well, tell us your story first, Robert, before we get into what New Communities is about. I understand that you are a returning citizen yourself.
Correct. I was released from prison July 22nd, 2008, and headed the direction of ministry right there after that release, because I knew I had to do every single thing different that I was doing before. Changing basically the whole environment that I was in.
How long were you incarcerated?
4.5 years.
Okay. And so now you've been out 5.
Correct.
And you haven't been back.
Oh, good Lord, no.
Yeah. Well, 5 years is, we have found that's a significant milestone. At least we have found it's kind of like 2 years is the first milestone. You're probably 50% through. They say 5 years, you're about 90% through, and at 7 years, they say that if a person has not been back for 7 years, that he's no more likely to commit crime than even a person who's never been in. So you're almost home free by God's grace.
Amen. I knew about the 2-year mile marker, but there was a good celebration at the 5-year mile marker, and now I guess I got to wait for 7. So,
yeah. Well, that's why you may recall this last year, our governor signed into law to expunge the criminal record of people who have been out for 8 years, so that it can't come up during their job interviews and so forth. So they were aware of that 7-year mark and gave it another year just for good measure. That it makes no sense to be holding that against a person when he's no more likely to recidivate than a person who's never been incarcerated. So those kind of milestones are very important. Now, at New Communities, you're working with Healing Communities to help people when they get out. But it's not only formerly incarcerated people, but also people who are struggling with drug addictions or alcoholism, and people in recovery. Am I correct?
Correct. People in recovery and people affected by crime as well. Healing Communities is more than just the one that's incarcerated. It's everyone affected by the crime, whether it's the one that was a victim in the crime or someone that might be left behind because someone made a crime, I make a crime and then I turn around and I leave some kids or a wife behind that are struggling because they've lost their father.
So all of those who have been traumatized, can you get those all in one room?
It's difficult.
Right.
We normally do a large celebration at the beginning of the night, which is kind of
a worship time,
a corporate teaching time, where everyone comes together. Typically 300 people a week.
Wow, that's a big crowd.
It's a very big crowd.
What's the biggest hurdle that people are facing when they get out of prison, and what you see there in Healing Communities?
Typically, it's to slow down and allow God to move at His time. You spend all the time in prison, and you are sitting there doing nothing for this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
And the second you're released, you want everything now. You want to be able to do it immediately.
Wow. Make up for lost time.
Correct. You have thought through the process of every single thing you're going to do. You've thought through the process. Well, I've got to get a job. I've got to get my family back. I have to get a home. So you start working it through in your mind, and you get out, and it's like a race, and you are overly almost overly zealous at the point where you are just rushing through things and you don't even see anything happening. Things pass you by. You almost get overwhelmed, making too many appointments in a day, what have you, and because you want everything right now to kind of make up for lost time.
I've never heard this, and I've been in the business for a long time. That particular aspect of it, making up for lost time, and you kind of hinted at it, but what happens? They kind of crash and burn. They kind of, all of a sudden just.
Well, things kind of get out of control that way. You lose sight of the focus of what you're supposed to do. You're not staying centered in God. You're not staying centered on the right things. And typically then when you hit a crisis situation, you kind of switch into a survival mode at that moment. And that's typically when people reoffend, is when they hit that survival mode, because their instincts are to fix the problem and not wait for maybe the paycheck that's coming down the road. You hit a bill or something, you're about to lose your home, and the survival instinct comes in immediately. And as soon as that survival instinct comes in, you're going to try to solve the problem, whether it's the bill that's not being paid. So you go back to maybe a crime because that's a quick fix for it.
And also, I would imagine, and I guess I have seen this, there can be sort of an impatience for people around you not to make things happen and not to do things for you, right?
There's a heavy anticipation of getting things done quickly, and that's that chaos that comes with being very just the chaos of being released, that have to do it now sense of mentality.
Now, how did you avoid that mistake?
There was really not ever avoiding it, because you can't. What it is
so you feel the pressure.
You feel the pressure regardless, and it's about having the right people around you to be kind of a level head and a nice level thinking. I can remember upon release, I was living at a house, and it was just renting a room, and there was a inappropriate situation with the lady that owned the house. I couldn't really see what was going on, and I had a need for a home, so I wasn't paying attention to the inappropriate situation. One of the senior pastors at New Community Church noticed it and said, "Robert, we're moving you this weekend." And I said,
"Get you out of there."
Yeah, he said, that you're not thinking clearly at this point. He thought for me, thought through a process, and then after it was done, I looked at it and I could see the situation clearly at that point. At the beginning, though, I couldn't see the nose right in front of my face.
Wow. So you got connected with New Community Church quite soon after you got out, and their Friday night recovery program and so forth, and the people there provided your cover, provided the scaffold that your life needed to get back on track. Is that right?
Scaffold and support. I actually started going to community recovery in New Community Church 3 days after my release.
Wow.
And I walked into it, and the first thing I said was, I don't need recovery. I'm not hooked on any drugs. I'm not addicted to any substance, so I don't need that. And really what community recovery is all about is recovery from life, dysfunction, bad habits, what have you. So it's about breaking that insanity.
Well, there's more connection than maybe a lot of people realize, because remember we talked about that 2, 5, and 7 year thing?
Correct.
It's the same thing for an alcoholic and a drug addict.
Yep.
2 years, 5 years, 7 years. And so the fact is, I think there's an institutionalization of a person who's been incarcerated that has the same effect on them as a drug, or as alcohol dependency, right? Because they're not used to being on their own, and they're stuck in an institutional setting where they're being told every day what to do. It's a dramatic has a dramatic emotional effect, I would think.
Yes, you wind up becoming dependent on the system.
Yeah.
And then when you don't feel the system is working the way you feel it should, you get impatient, and again, that chaos is kicking in.
Now Healing Communities, which Harold Trulier started, is that something that's only can be done here in West Michigan, or is that something that can be done nationwide? Is it available to anybody?
It's actually a nationwide movement.
Okay.
It started on the East Coast in Boston with Dr. Trulier, and
Right.
then it has moved to now 22 different cities in the United States. Oklahoma is very successful at it. Florida has a great pocket of it, and it's any city that wants to get a group of churches together to start thinking and doing the community basis the right way. We look at care ministries in a church, and a care ministry is basically the whole church gets involved. Some ladies will cook a meal, other people will get cards ready to send out, and there's a whole group of people that come around someone that's sick. Well, when there's an incarcerated one, there's a sense of shame and almost I don't want to tell anybody that my son's gone to prison, or
Right.
there's a
Code of
there's a
silence. Yeah.
exactly, there's something that you are not prompted to say anything about. So typically there's one or two people that are in prison ministry in a church, where it really is part of the Great Commission that the whole church should be involved in it.
Yeah, you bet. So the fact is that healing communities, if there's any church people out there watching and they'd like to see their church or the churches in their community get more involved in helping people who are returning citizens, and to get on track and stay on track, they can go to Healing Communities. There's probably a website there, and they can get connected and get some training, because frequently I have seen where churches or individuals they say, well, I want to help ex-offenders, people returning from prison, and they have almost a romantic, idealistic
the honeymoon effect. Yes.
Yeah, right. The honeymoon part of the ministry, right? And so, well, I'm going to help these poor people, kind of thing, But then they have not been trained, and then they can easily get burned because it overwhelms them, and then they can get very cynical, and nobody wants to help people from prison anymore. Am I right? That
Correct.
The importance of that training is so crucial. Otherwise, the whole church can get turned off to helping people from prison, right?
Correct, because there's and again, I'll speak from experience of things. There was a situation at New Community Church where there was a returning citizen that came to the church, worked for the church for a while, and then the safe came up missing. And he explained to the police and all the staff at the church how easy it was to break into the doors. Turns out he was the one that stole the safe. And situations like that make it where the whole church doesn't want to be involved, because they don't want to be their home. They don't want to be affected. It's I like to call it around our church, dirty church, because you're really getting your hands dirty with the situation that way.
Well, my hat's off to your church, New Community Church, which is housing this Healing Communities arm here, because I know that you guys work with sex offenders and stuff too, and many churches don't want to get their hands dirty that way, and certainly we understand the hesitancy of people if we have little children and so forth and are attending that church, and we know that there's potential for harm. But the fact is that it makes a huge difference if people are not just left on their own, but if they can come into a loving community, maybe with firm boundaries in place, because that's one thing that ex-offenders and people in recovery usually are dysfunctional and don't have good boundaries in place with others, correct?
Correct. They typically have a very loose boundary system.
Yeah.
The church itself, with like the CSCs that you're talking about, the criminal sexual conducts, when someone like that gets out of prison, it's been proven that they are more successful if they have a full family or church base that's around them, because that
rather
way,
than being isolated.
Instead of being isolated, because then they're back to thinking, and you kind of get into that stinking thinking mentality where you're not thinking healthy. But if you're surrounded by a good foundation of Christians and Bible studies and programming and things, those boundaries you were talking about, if you're surrounded by a situation like that, you're set up for success instead of failure.
I would think that, and we've quickly run out of time here, but I would think that for the position that you're in as a pastor of recovery, that when somebody, a returning citizen, discovers that church and so forth, and talks to you, you speak with a lot of credibility because you can say, "I've been there."
I come with instant street creds, is what they say.
Okay, right, right. Well, we just want to wish you God's blessings as you continue. Basically, kind of a new position for you as you've just been recently ordained and to this pastoral position. And could you come back again sometime, and we'll see how you're doing in a couple of years?
I'd love to. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you for being here, Robert. We've been talking with Robert Natras from Healing Communities in West Michigan. And we hope that you enjoyed the program. You can go to the website for New Community Church, I think, and find more information on this.
Yep.
And we'll put that on the screen at what that website is.
New Community, Healing Communities, Community Recovery all have their own websites.
They all have their own websites.
Yep.
So those that are our viewers can find more information that way.
Yes.
So thank you for being with us, and we hope that you'll be with us again right here next week.